Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Possibilities with Monique de Maio. I'm so happy to have you here. I am super, super happy and very grateful to have with me Tiffany Olson. I will introduce her bio. She's got such a long bio. You guys are going to be so impressed with this woman. I have the dubious distinction and honor of being on a podcast with her right now called The Big Sale Illuminati, which is a fun, fun, fun thing. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about who you have with you today. Tiffany Olson is a board member of Telex Innovations and Castle Biosciences. She's been a board member at places like Langham Logistics. She's been president of Nuclear and Precision Health Solutions at Cardinal Health. She's been a board member at a surgeon. She has held positions as president of Navimed. She's been head of diagnostics for Eli Lilly. She's been president and CEO of Roche Diagnostics. She has been in places that we can only dream about. She started her career in corporate accounts in pharmaceutical and has risen through the ranks. And now, who we have in front of us is quite someone. She has an MBA from the University of St. Thomas Opus College and a bachelor's from the University of Minnesota. I can't speak enough about her character, who she is. She's a mom of two, married and lives in Indianapolis, Indiana. And welcome, Tiffany Olson. Did I do your bio justice?
Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you very much. And yes, yes, you did.
Thank you for being here. So, there's so much to unpack. You've been a corporate woman leader for a long, long time. And that is the core group of who's listening to this podcast, right? The people who are trying to be you when they grow up, or they're you and they don't know what what to do next, or they're trying really, really hard to catch up to you. But all that to say, what was the journey like? When you were a young woman, tell us a little bit about the beginning and what you had to face. I talk about discrimination and sexism in my book, and being that we're just about the same age, I think you probably have some great stories to tell that might have helped you craft the Tiffany of today.
First of all, so my journey started actually when I was a very young girl. So when other girls were playing Barbie, I played store. I was making a profit at 5 years old. And I knew that I was born to run a business. And throughout like my entire career then, starting going to the University of Minnesota and then on to get my MBA at the University of St. Thomas, I always knew that that was my focus, that that's exactly what I was going to do. I always had a love and a fascination about business. And through that, I've always been very interested in people and how people interact with each other, which is really leadership because leadership is all about how do you get people to align and work together for a particular goal. So throughout my career, I've had opportunities to kind of continue to work in those areas and, just really kind of continue to go down that path. And, Monique, I know one of the things that we had talked about was really how do you lead being authentic? Because that's been something that I've had to learn how to do and learn how to lead from a position of my own personality. And I should actually amend that by saying lead from a position of my own appropriate business personality.
Okay. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, because as we know, being authentic doesn't mean that you tell everybody everything. It means that you provide authentic stories about yourself that make sense to help kind of move the business along. And that's been something that I've spent a lot of time working on. And as I was hearing more about your book and as we were talking about it, I had attended a class and had done some reading on authentic leadership. And there is an article, and I wanted to share this with you and your listeners, and you may very well know it, but it is a Harvard Business Review article called "Discovering Your Authentic Leadership," and it was written by. Are you familiar with it?
I've heard of it. I hadn't read it though. Haven't read it.
Yeah. So four professors and researchers put this together, and what they did is they said authentic leadership. There's like five qualities that people have that show after their thousands and thousands of interviews. So, just really quickly, I thought that I'd just kind of go over them. So, first one, and the easiest and the hardest, be yourself. Easy to say, right? But when you think about it, so leadership has so many different voices. If you look at all of the great leaders, every one of them is different. And it's all about don't emulate someone else because there's not one cookie cutter style. So, good news is we all know how to be ourselves. Everyone knows how to do it. Bad news is, or challenging news is, you have to learn how to do that when you're stressed, when you're presenting, when you're in front of 500 people, when you're in front of 15, when you're just one on one with an employee. And that's what the tricky part of it is. And then the second thing that they came up with, witnessed, is that people trust you when you're genuine and when you're authentic. And you can smell a fake a mile away. I mean, think of like a presentation that you've heard from someone and they're saying the right things, but you just don't believe them. Yeah. I mean, there's examples, especially now with the political climate creeping up again. They just aren't authentic. And then the third one was have a passion for your purpose and practice it. And I call this kind of lead out loud. So lead out loud with what your passion and your values are and how they interact with the business and why that's important to you and why people should understand that. And then the last two, which I thought were good reminders. One, build that strong support team because those are the people that will be honest with you. And if you don't have someone in that support team that's honest with you, then you need to add someone that is, because that's where you're going to get that honest feedback that keep you being authentic. And then the last one is don't fret adversity so much because authentic leaders, look at that as a challenge. They're all learning experiences, and so you can keep going. So that's really, you know, I enjoyed learning not only kind of classroom style, but certainly on the job in the trenches, under gunfire.
So what was it like? I mean, you have your MBA, you're like a smart person. How did you get into pharma sales, first of all?
It actually occurred because I had a mentor who strongly encouraged that I go into pharma sales. So at the University of Minnesota at the time, you could do all kinds of interviewing on campus. And I had two positions that I was debating. One was with uh, Cargill on Nutrina Feeds Division, and it was an incredible management program. And the other one was pharmaceutical sales. And I never thought of myself as a salesperson. I was like, I don't drive a big Cadillac. I don't drink bourbon. It's going to be very difficult for me. And my mentor at the time said, you need to go into sales, and here's why. Because when you understand the customer, you become the most valuable person in your company and you understand the customer by selling to them every single day. And I took that position and I really kind of never looked back. And that was my first entree into healthcare. And I have stayed there ever since. I love being in the healthcare space. It is just a really important space for me.
Totally. Yeah, totally. That so the just to put a pin in that, the young women who are listening or women who have daughters of a certain age. I was speaking to one the other day at an event, Women in Technology, and she was saying, her daughter doesn't know what she wants to do, but they're very definitive sometimes of what they will and will not do, and so on and so forth. And the one thing that I did notice is the lack of engagement, typically the lack of engagement with students and the resources that they have their beck and call. So you have a campus services, you have a career services, you have career advisories, you have mentors, you have professors. Tap into them and ask them what they're seeing, what they're listening to, what they're doing, what they recommend, because they have that context, right? So that's something that you listened, you heard, you did, and you succeeded.
Yeah, that's great advice, Monique, too, because both my children have graduated from college, but during that experience, they both had very different experiences. My son went to a business school, and my daughter went to a college of global arts. And the business school was all about this is what you need to do to get a job. We're bringing people on campus. You have to have your LinkedIn page. You have to put your resume together. The Global studies was more enjoy the world, see the world, and thank you for spending 4 years here. And so there was a really, it was very difficult then for her to really know what she wanted to do because there wasn't that kind of school guidance. She now is an attorney, went to law school, which was an incredible, wonderful fit for her. But sometimes it takes a while because, just as you said, you know what you don't want to do. That's pretty easy because you do something, you go, yeah, nah, not doing that anymore, versus the whole world. And I always say, explore. Nothing is forever. So if you have a opportunity to join a company and you think it's a good company, but you're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this when I'm 50. You're not going to be doing it when you're 50. So in a way, that becomes irrelevant. Do it if you think it gets you to a path to go somewhere else. Back to your earlier question of kind of my career journey. One of the things that I always did was I knew I wanted to run that business, but I didn't start out being able to run a business. So every position that I took, I looked at, is this going to help me in my ultimate goal of being able to run a business? So one time I had a staff position, had an operational position, and it one got me out of my comfort zone, and you learn to lead and manage differently. But I always knew that's not where I'm going to end my career. It's just a part of the journey.
It was a stepping stone. So you viewed this as this was in your ultimate goal. So I like the way you chunked it up for yourself. You said this is not where I'm going to be forever, but it is my stepping stone to get ultimately where I want to be. And sometimes I'm sure you had moments where you weren't sure where you were going to ultimately end up. But here's the thing, the end up, isn't that like sort of subjective and it changes day to day?
I would say not day to day, but it changed in sections of my life. So when I had children, I had very different goals. I didn't want to travel. I would travel, but not as much. My husband traveled also at the time. So as we need to both have flexible enough travel that we can manage through the schedules. When they were in, grade school, I had a little bit different goals. And then when they were in college, I had kind of different kind of personal goals that I could flex. So I always tried to make sure that what was going on in my life personally fit the job that I had. And sometimes you end up finding yourself where your personal life changes. Like my mother became very ill and I had to take care of her, and my job didn't change. So, what else then was I able to do to try to get some of that change so that I could balance that? And that can be very difficult, especially depending on the level you are in an organization and whether or not you've got flexibility in the job. And I know that those are very difficult transitions for people.
Well, it's funny because the premise of this podcast was to create to end the book was to create a life that you love with intention. So, you can't, I say this in the introduction, it's like you can't be all things all the time, 100% of the time throughout your entire career. Things are going to ebb and flow. And the reference I made to the day to day was the decision I make today will impact the life I lead in 5 years. The decision I make tomorrow may impact a different thing and so on. So every day I'm impacting future. I just don't know how I'm doing it. You seem to have much more intentionality than most women I've met, which is very, very cool. How did that authenticity of being like comfortable in your own skin, how did that develop for you?
So I'll answer that a couple of ways. I think one on the authenticity, I'll talk to that next. But I think the intentionality, I have always been a very focused person. And I do try to look at things with a longer term lens. So in 5 years, in 10 years, what do I wanna do? And I have periodically done exercises with myself and a close group of friends that I trust. There's like 2 or 3 of us. I belonged to a forum where there were 7 of us, where we would go on retreats and specifically talk about the intentionality of our lives, the intentionality of our work. And we would have a facilitator, one person in the group that might assign pre-work, have some of the questions, and then it was a discussion. And it was really very personalized. And at the end, one time we wrote ourselves letters of, okay, you're going to open this up in 5 years. What do you want it to read? And those types of questions really provide some intentionality. And it's not that then after the retreat, I would go back and go, okay, now I'm a changed woman. I'm going to, quit this and do that. But it provided that little seedling of saying, all right, is this going to help? Is this not? How important is this that I need to be doing? So it put more of a lens and a focus on that part of my life. But this journey to authenticity is something that I as I was thinking about your book, Monique, there was really a turning point for me where I kind of learned this the hard way because I wasn't being authentic and everybody knew it. And it was when I was the CEO of Roche Diagnostics, and we were having this meeting. It was a national sales meeting, and we were at the Indy 500 track. It was incredible. It wasn't race day, but we were having the meeting there. It was a new product launch, and I had a speechwriter who wrote a beautiful, funny, smart speech, and it incorporated all of these racing things with our new device launch. And I mean, it was just absolutely fabulous. And I'm not a racing expert, car expert, not me at all. So I started out strong. I was up there, I was killing it. And then about halfway through, I kind of started to stumble. I was mixing up my words. I mispronounced a driver's name. There's a couple of, in the audience. And I became really uneasy. I became stressed, started to sweat. But worst of all was that the audience became uneasy. Yeah, I mean, we've all been there when the speaker is so bad, you're just like, oh my God, I just feel for this person. I mean, seriously, I was a train wreck, or what I learned to say is I was a car wreck, I guess was the appropriate. So what I did is I actually stopped speaking and I admitted that I was a racing fraud. I knew nothing about it. I tore up the speech.
Wow, balls, said the queen.
I just spoke from my heart. Well, I'll tell you what, it wasn't perfect, probably wasn't very pretty, but it was authentic. And I had really connected with people because after that, it changed how people saw me. They saw me as very approachable. Obviously, here she stumbled, she called, at least she admitted it. And what I learned is that, before I was always trying to be perfect, perfect words, everything had to sound exactly the way it needed to sound. And instead of just trying to get the message across, and I learned that perfect is the enemy of authenticity. And that's been a lesson that, I've kept with me. And although I still do a lot of prep when I'm doing big audience speaking, I still think of, you want to know what? If you stumble, you stumble. Everybody does it. Don't sweat it. Start over, admit it, do whatever you need to do, but you'll get through it. You'll live through the experience.
Wow, that is so good. That's a master class. Perfection is the enemy of authenticity. It's so true.
Yes.
It's funny. I interviewed a couple of ladies for the book itself, and within that context, those who were again our peers talked about being raised with this notion of the perfection thing. We had to look perfect. We had to, perfect manners, perfect dress, perfect, outfit, perfect, perfect, perfect. And there was so much emphasis placed on the exterior appearance and the appearance of really having it together. And even if you didn't have it together, you weren't really encouraged to show that or express that or unpack that. And I just wondered, like, what did you go through yourself for this whole perfection thing? Did it impact how you raised your own daughter, who I think is about the same age as my daughter now?
When I started in business, and for many, many years, it was taboo to talk about, especially women, personal life, kids, any type of challenges that you had. It seemed like it was a real competitive environment, and it was simply about fitting in. And I've got a story about this that I'll say in a moment. But it was really about fitting in and looking the same. My mother, I wish I had the book, I would lift it up. I still have it. I have kept it to this day. My mother gave me a book when I graduated from college that said, Dress for Success.
I remember that book.
I still own the suit that's on the cover of that book. I tell you, I still think I wear it occasionally.
God
But
bless
it
you. You
was,
can get into it. So there's that.
well, that I wouldn't be able to do. However,
It's so good.
but it was all about exactly as you said, what you look like on the outside to fit in. And I had a briefcase that was on the cover of the book. She outfitted me in the cover of the book. But the one thing that she did tell me is that you also have to make sure that you're dressed for success on the inside because you need to have your integrity. You need to know who you are. You need to make sure that, you add your own personal value. So looking on the outside, and we spent a lot of time making sure that, the clothes and everything else that, you fit in, that you looked like you belong. That was huge for women back then. But my mom's words of wisdom were, but also make sure you're dressed on the inside because that is also extremely important. And I always tried to heed that advice. But, I would say back to kind of the difference when you try to fit in and kind of connect with people, because I think it's hard to connect with people when you're just trying to fit in. But there was a time when I was in an environment that was very different from what I was used to. And I had taken a promotion with a company. I moved to a new country, and I was the only woman in senior leadership, but also, several layers down. I was the only one with young children, and I was the only American. And so, people were just trying to figure out who this very strange looking unicorn was. I was very different from everybody else. It was really hard for people to connect with me. They were friendly,
Right.
but
No. Well, the
it's
Swiss are
just,
like
yeah.
that, but they're not.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was really tough. But then something happened and everything changed. So what happened was the weekend came. And my husband, Brad, my kids, Jess and Kevin, and our dog, Dakota, we were all hanging out together and we lived on the fifth floor of this apartment. Now, remember, fifth floor, it becomes an important detail. But our dog, Dakota, sees a bird outside. It starts running for it through our apartment, through the balcony, over the balcony. We don't see her anymore. So we all run over the railing and we look down. And luckily, that dog had landed on this very small awning, 3 feet by 6 feet, but it was 12 feet down. It's like a well oiled machine. Brad leans over. I grab his legs. The kids grab my legs, hoist Brad down, just down by one hand, takes the scruff of our dog's 65-pound dog neck, throws her back on the balcony. Well, thankfully, she was okay. But here is what I learned about my voice and authenticity. So Monday comes and I go to work. And the culture was very friendly, polite. Hello, how was your weekend? The appropriate response, fine. How was yours? Fine. And then you move on and never see each other again. So I get to the office, how was your weekend? And I told them this story that I had just told you. And we started to connect on this really deep personal level. They started asking me about my family, how were people integrating into the culture. They started telling me about theirs, and we connected. And people still 10 years later come up and talk to me about this story of the dog. But what I found was I had found my voice. And what I learned was that, you know, often when we're the only, and in my case, I was, the only woman, we just try to fit in versus belong. And my trying to fit in was, I wasn't being authentic because fitting in is like trying to be like everyone else. But belonging, it's about being yourself and being understood and being accepted for who you are. And I learned that I could share these authentic, business appropriate stories. And that is what connects us is the stories and people learning more about you and they learn about your values through these stories. And so that was really another turning point for me.
That is a great. I think I'm gonna. I wish I had that soundbite for my book, the fit in versus belonging, because I had a lot of challenges myself personally with that coming to this country and trying to fit in, but also belong.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. When you are different in whatever that looks like for you, not a native English speaker coming in, probably at an age, a younger age that is even more hard than as an adult, it's tough.
Yeah, kids are cruel.
Yes.
They
Yes,
can
they
be
are.
so cruel. You think adults are mean? You should try children. Yikes! No, I'm kidding.
Absolutely.
Stunted my growth for years. No. Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective. And the dog really, I find sometimes it's because it's safe. The dogs, the pets, they're safe. They're what everybody can rally around because we all have them. And then all of a sudden the pets go to family and we all have those. And then they go to houses and homes and families and it's like we're all trying to do the best we can.
Yes. And it unites around something that, like you said, people love their pets and can relate. And it was just this relatable story of something that happened to me that crossed all cultural borders. And that was really the breakthrough for me there.
God bless your family. They seem very organized. 65-pound dog with like a chain of humans trying to get her. It's like, oh,
Oh my gosh. Yes, it was so stressful, and it was the first day we moved in, and then my kids were like, "Oh, mom, we can't live here." I'm like, "Hey, we don't have a choice. It's not safe for the dog." I'm like, "We don't have a choice. We're
that's
living
right.
here."
We're gonna put some what do you call it, baby guards all over the place. But yeah, we're staying here, but that's the way it goes. So that's really a cool perspective, the whole fit in versus belonging. And then so as you're going up through the ranks, you're the unicorn still, only woman. I share that with you. That actually that experience for me had me start my own business because I couldn't be. The unicorn was treated very differently. Were you treated differently than your peers, your male peers? Well, I mean, until you outrank them, of course. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
And then I think I probably still treated differently. I think as the world turned, the world got older, I progressed in my career, things changed. Think of all of the cultural changes in the United States and globally over the years. I would say that, yes, I was treated differently, from it being such a maybe tight fraternity into how do we let women and other ideas come in to now where I think there are still challenges. And I'm not going to, diminish or dismiss that there are still challenges, but I believe that at least the education and the thought process of diversity is a good thing. Diversity of thought leads to innovation. And to get diversity of thought, you have to have diverse people, whether it be ethnicity, gender, geographic, life experience, you name it. That's where you really get kind of that richness of being in a team and moving things forward.
Yeah, that's a very good perspective. I think there's still this reticence, that if I surround myself with people that are different than me, then that the at least my experience was that I will diminish my power, right? So the power base was felt struggle, felt
Yeah.
what's the word? Confronted,
Yes.
right? There's
Yes.
conflict in my power base. So if I
Yeah.
let this woman in, what is she going to do to my boys' club?
Yeah. The one thing that I learned being a leader is that I always wanted to surround myself with everyone who was different, but everyone bring in something unique. So everybody had value, but if everyone was bringing in the same things, then you only need one person. And it's really, I'm not a big. I told you I wasn't a big car person. I'm really not all that big of a sports person, but it's like a team. a football team, a volleyball team, a baseball team, every basketball, everyone needs to have their own value because together that's how you win. And it's one of those things where it can be intimidating or frustrating, and having to kind of read the room. I've gotten better at that. Not being the bull in the china shop, but being able to maneuver through the china shop is really important. And it comes with, and I wouldn't say that I'm great at doing that, but I've learned to slow down and take a deep breath before I do some of the things, before I break all the china.
I could never imagine you as a bull in a china shop knowing you as I know you today.
Well, thank you for that. There were earlier times.
Really, I'm interested to hear that because you come across as so poised and so intentional in your words and your actions today that I mean we call you Grace Kelly for Christmas sake, you know what I mean? So like or all of or Kate Winslet or Kate, like we think of you as that elegant, poised, very well spoken and yet graceful person, whereas I'm the bull in the china shop. I always look at myself as a bull in the china shop. You know, so how did you do that? There's still hope for me, by the way.
Well, I would say that I have used coaches throughout my career. When I get into difficult situations, I'm a very verbal person, so I will ask people for help. I'm not afraid for to ask people for help. Or boy, how did you handle this? Or, if I feel like somebody's really competing with me.
They're going to lose. I'm sorry. Did I say that?
But, just kind of those types of things, really trying to make sure that I'm aware of what is the best way for me to win, even if sometimes it's the harder way for me to get there, and recognize that sometimes it's not always easy. And I think it's just from talking with other people, and I've had mentors throughout my career, and a lot of great mentors, and different mentors at different times. Because as you change and your career changes, you not that you still don't get advice from your previous mentors, but sometimes you need to seek different mentors for different things.
That's also a masterclass. I think it's funny the head of my publishing company wrote a book called Super Mentors, you know? So yeah, so I started reading it and it's that idea. I think the premise is that you don't always need mentors. You need people to help you, to help guide you. And I think we couch it all into the word mentor, but really what you're saying is you had trusted advisors throughout the process. And it sounded like you got some training on conflict resolution potentially too, and things like this, because as a CEO level, you have a lot of that.
That really becomes almost your job, because what happens is you only get the problems that are at the DEFCON 5 level. And you only get the conflicts where people are going to blows, because everybody tries to resolve it before it gets to you. And then when they can't, then all of a sudden it's the emergency, it's the huge issue, it's the, you know, huge dollar mistake or customer mistake or whatever it is. And so you have to get used to that level of stress. It's usually on Friday afternoon. I will tell you that much. It is like that Friday 4 o'clock call. I finally felt like saying I'm never answering my phone after noon on Friday, because nothing good comes after noon on Friday. But it's when people are like, oh my gosh, now I've actually have to make the call because I can no longer resolve it myself. And that is just part of the job. But the other part of the job is looking toward the future and really saying, where's the market going to go? Where do we need to go? Because this is where the market has the potential to go. Or, the competition is coming at us in this way. How do we pivot? And so that's the really fun part of leadership.
Yes, I never really thought about the fact that as a corporate CEO, it's we've tried to resolve, we've tried to resolve, we've tried to resolve. Oh shit, we can't resolve. We have to take it to Tiffany. And that's, you're like where the buck stops.
Yes.
How do you like being on a board versus being? on deck at the, you know.
I love being on a board. I retired from my position at Cardinal about 18 months ago now. And I've done board work for years. Now I'm on 3 boards, 2 public, 1 private, and then a not-for-profit board, which is just absolutely great. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy when I can be involved in the strategy. I enjoy when I have a good relationship with the CEO because I think, I'm able to add value. And I enjoy when there are some strategic discussions that require us to really think differently. So that I do enjoy board work. I really do.
Good for you. That's awesome. Do you feel the pace of life now is better suited for what you want to do next, or what you're doing now, I should say?
So when I retired, I actually crossed the word retired out and said I'm going to reinvent.
Love it. People, that's another masterclass. Get that down. Not retire, reinvent.
Reinvent because I love business. I've done business for 40 plus years of my life, of my career. And I'm not just going to stop because one day I say, you know, what I was doing, the pace, I want a different pace, but I still want to work. And what board work gives me is the ability to still be involved in business, which I love. I've loved it since I was 5 years old, to stay involved and but to do it at a little bit different pace. And being on boards, it's a real ebb and flow because you have quarterly meetings where it's really intense. You've got the meeting, you've got the pre-work, many times it's 300 pages of reading. You have the general industry upkeep, competitive upkeep that, goes throughout when you're meeting and when you're not meeting. So the pace tends to be a little more mellow, really intense. A little mellow, very intense. I also do speaking, which I love. And I've been doing consulting and advising. And that is also when you're in a project, pretty intense, and then mellow when you aren't. So it's a different ebb and flow. And I kind of refer to it as when I was leading full time, it was like a well orchestrated symphony. Everything was great. And now it's jazz hands. Ooh, a little over here, a little over there, a little over there. And it's a different rhythm. It's not that one rhythm is bad or worse. It's just different. And so that's what I've been adjusting to is the difference in that rhythm and just trying, different things. But I enjoy what I'm doing now and this chapter of reinvention in my life.
I love that, the reinvention. I mean, you've been to Australia, you've worked from Australia, you've worked from Florida. You're doing a lot of traveling as well, which I think is intentional. So there's two questions I want to ask you, and one is, if you were to be able to whisper in the ear of the 30-year-old Tiffany today, would you say anything to her? And if you did, what would it be? And then the next one is, what would you say to all the women listening to this podcast? If you were to leave them with one or two nuggets, what would that be?
So I would leave them with what my mother had left me and something that I carry with me. So my mother greatly inspired me throughout my life and my career. She was a single mom, no college degree, worked a ton of jobs. We rarely had a lot of money, but she was very rich in advice. And she encouraged me every single day to further my career. That's one of the reasons why I have an MBA and to really set my goals high. It was always, no, you can do better here, you can reach higher. But her best piece of advice, and I will tell you, Monique, this has guided me throughout my career. I'm a cancer survivor. When I was fighting cancer, it helped me go every single day. Something that I tell my kids, and I would tell all of the listeners listening to this, which is my mother always told me, never let anyone tell you can't do something. So never let anybody tell you can't do that because no matter how tough life gets, just keep going. Just keep going. And that has what has helped me to overcome so many challenges. And it's what I tell my kids because if you're walking through hell, just keep walking. You'll get out of it. Just keep walking. And so that's been the advice that I have really lived my life on, and something that I tell anybody that will listen.
This too shall pass, as they say. That's amazing. And would you have said that to your 30-year-old Tiffany self as well?
Yes. And I did use that mantra when challenges were tough, because my mom started telling me that probably when I was in high school. And certainly through college, because college was one where, as I said, she was a working mom that I had to pay for myself. I did a lot of, working full time, going to college, taking a class at night, and that's not easy and it's not fun. Not particularly fun, but it was, got to keep going. Don't let somebody tell you you can't do that. Why aren't you able to get your degree? Those types of things. And so that I was telling my 30-year-old self that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. This has been really, really, really fun. Great advice, you guys. We heard some really great stuff from Tiffany throughout, and multiple things occur to me as things that we could create a workshop out of, to be honest. Your authentic leadership, the questions you ask yourself, be yourself. People trust you when you are genuine. You have maybe I should put my glasses on. That usually helps. What do you think? You have build a passion for what you love. Lead out loud is what you called it. Build a strong support team around you so that you can get the reality checks that you potentially need, and don't fret adversity because everybody's going to have it. Another thing that you said, which was fantastic, is perfection is the enemy of authenticity, which I love. Dress for success on the inside. Boy, I wish I had gotten an opportunity to meet your mom. She sounds like a fantastic human being.
She was fabulous. I miss her every day.
Wow. There's a difference between fitting in and belonging. I think that is a distinction with a difference that I learned today. Diversity all the way through, not just in shape, size, and color, but also in thought, in approach, in backgrounds. And your last but not least, mom advice that don't tell anybody that you can't do that. So I think I've captured all of my Tiffanyisms and wisdom. And I thank you profusely for having come here today. Tiffany, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was so much fun. It really was.
Thank you all for joining us. We welcome you anytime to Possibilities with Monique de Maio. Look forward to having you again. Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique de Maio, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it, or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at moniquedemaio.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.